Welcome. Welcome back to most of you, and if you're here for the first time, we're glad to have you with us as well. The class was advertised as a class on Christian evidences, and we're using a book. Andrew, would you show that? I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And we've talked about truth and is there such a thing as truth and some different things along the way. But tonight we're going to start getting into the idea of I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Let me tell you something. I started reading this book after these guys invited me to be a part of this. I'm not a fan of philosophy, meaning I had one philosophy class in college and I did not like it. And if any of you went to OC and you had Bailey McBride for a teacher, wonderful man, horrible subject. I passed, that's all I can say about it. And I kind of felt like that's where we were headed with this. My idea of Christian evidences was a little bit different, but we are actually heading in the way that I thought we were going to. Secondly, please don't make fun. This is the first time I've ever made a PowerPoint on my own. And those two over there, they shamed me into it. And luckily, you heard somebody on the far side of the room over there applauding. That would be my daughter, who does this a lot in her work. And so we had telephone consultations. How do I do? So I'll just say this: if it doesn't look right,
you know, when we were talking about before y'all showed up, he didn't mention you at all.
let's have a prayer. Father, we're grateful that we can be here, that we have this facility to meet in, that our elders have deemed it appropriate that we meet in the middle of the week. We're thankful, Father, to have our faith challenged from time to time. We're thankful for your holy word and that we can study it and know that what you want from us. And we're thankful that we have avenues to strengthen our faith. And my prayer tonight, Father, is through this class that all who participate will in some way be better prepared to be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within them. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So I always like to start a class with a review. What did we do last time? Andrew was up here, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. He started with, why do people believe what they believe? There are sociological reasons, psychological reasons, religious reasons, philosophical reasons. And he asked the question, are any of those on their own enough to make us believe something? And so we had a discussion about that. He made this point: any teaching, whether it's religious or otherwise, is worth trusting only if it points to truth. Okay? There are many beliefs in the world today that are held that are not supported by evidence, but they are held because of the preferences of the people that have those particular beliefs. Many, many times, in order to find truth, a person will have to give up those personally held subjective preferences in favor of objective facts. We're going to see some of that tonight with some names, or at least one name that you're going to recognize. Personal preferences got in the way of this guy, and it led him to believe what he believed, even in the face of evidence that said otherwise. There's a little tease for something we'll do a little bit later. Andrew talked about Western logic, that is either or, versus Eastern logic. Logic in the East says you can have two things be right even if they're contradictory. In the West, either or, it's either this way, either Jesus lived and died and was resurrected, or he didn't. And that's Western thought. We talked about last week the law of non-contradiction, which says a contradictory claim, two contradictory claims cannot both be true at the same time and in the same sense. Think about that one. If we have two things that are opposed to each other, they cannot both be true. Okay. He introduced us to some different names. Hume, who was a skeptic, Kant, who said there was no way to know anything about anything, because our senses and our minds form all of the data, not our objective observance. And the example that he used was, look out the window at a tree. According to Kant, a tree is not really something there. What you're seeing is what your mind is telling you is there. So there's a little bit different thought. Hume was a skeptic, I think I said that. He brought up that question of truth. How is it known? He talked about something called the law of the excluded middle. Okay? 2 examples. All men are mortal. Spencer is a man, therefore Spencer is mortal. Pretty logical conclusion. Now listen to this one. All men are 4-legged reptiles. Zachary is a man. Thus, Zachary is a 4-legged reptile. Logically, realistically, no way. I don't know. Does anybody know Zach? Or anybody else that's a man that's a 4-legged reptile? Okay, so sometimes the law of the excluded middle is not going to work. He asked the question, how are truths known about God? How about this one? Who cares about truth? Do we really care? Do we really care about truth? Your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, and they may not be the same thing. And we don't care about it. Oh yes, we do. We care about it very, very much in the area of morality, in the area of our finances. My truth is I have $1 bazillion. The bank does not agree with me, but my truth says we care about that stuff. Where we don't care about it is religiously. I'm going to believe what I believe, and you believe what you want to believe, and that's okay because that's your truth, and my truth is my truth, and so on. Even if someone says that truth and morality doesn't matter, well, that's not true. Because if somebody treats them immorally, they care about that. The success in life, if we are to achieve success, depends on the moral choices that we make. Another thought that he brought, all laws in some way, shape, or form legislate morality. Think about that. Don't tell me that truth and morality doesn't matter. Every law we have in some way legislates morality. So, mankind is obviously impacted by what we believe to be true about morality. You can't cut religion out of it. We are impacted by what we believe about religion as well. Okay,
Real quick, Richard. Western logic, either or, Eastern logic, and both. If to combat Eastern logic even still stands with either you follow Eastern logic or you don't. So it still becomes either or.
Yeah.
There is no and in both, no matter what they say.
The name of the book is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. The chapter, and we're just going through this book chapter by chapter, is called In the Beginning There Was a Great Surge. I think last week one of the guys said that they had to read the chapter that they were presenting multiple times before it began to make sense. The chapter that I'm presenting is called In the Beginning There Was a Great Surge. And I read it, and I highlighted, and I read it again, and I highlighted some more, and I took it to work and read it on breaks. And then I called Dale. I said, what is he saying? Do you agree with this? We had a little bit of a conversation about it, and I read it again. Okay, it's kind of making some sense. So my hope tonight in what I'm going to present to you also makes some sense, and we don't have to do it 5 times. There's no promises that that's the case or not, okay? So there's the review. We just did that. I can make a PowerPoint. I don't know how to use it. Preview. We are going to talk about does God exist? We're going to begin to address that question. We're not going to finish it tonight, but we're going to begin to address that. We're going to talk about some things like the cosmological argument. We're going to talk about the second law of thermodynamics. We're going to talk about general relativity and the law of causality. I'm not smart enough for this stuff. there are things that are beyond the way that I think, and I'm being absolutely serious. I was taught, this is right, when I was a kid, that God said, let there be light. And I don't have any problem whatsoever believing that and accepting that. And I don't have to go into all this stuff to try to prove it. But that's where the world is. And so we're going to start talking about these things tonight, okay? Some terms that we're going to talk about: the cosmological argument, the second law of thermodynamics, it's kind of a repeat, isn't it? The general relativity, and the law of causality. The name of the chapter, in the beginning there was a great surge. That surge is going to turn out to be an acronym here in just a second, and we'll go through what each of the letters stand for. The cosmological argument, which I will define for you momentarily, is one of the strongest arguments that the universe had a beginning, which then supports the case for a theistic God. We're going to talk about beginnings, and beginnings have causes. Well, what's the cause? And you can see where that goes straight to God. Okay. Irritating facts. Everybody's heard this guy, Albert Einstein, right? I don't know much about Einstein. He's just like the smartest guy, right? That's what we think. 1916, Einstein believes that the universe is eternal. That is, it has always been, it did not have a beginning. That means it didn't have a creator. It just always was. Now, I wish I'd brought, and Andrew can show you this if he holds it up, you can't see it, but in this chapter, it shows a bunch of these equations that they were not taught in my math classes at Putnam City West. I hear they were really strange looking equations, but Einstein is doing all these calculations. Remember, the universe is eternal. It didn't have a creator. He's doing these calculations, and his calculations are leading him to a different conclusion. The conclusion was that it had a beginning. It had a creator. Einstein found this to be very irritating because he wanted to believe this. You remember, did you hear what I just said? He wanted to believe this. Remember what I said a little while ago about personally held subjective beliefs? He wanted to believe this. He's working out these calculations, and he's going through something that he doesn't like. It irritated him because it's starting to show that what he wants to believe is not right. He wanted the universe to be self-existent, not relying on any kind of an outside cause or a creator. And that's I'll probably say that over and over, because when they talk about a cause, that is talking about a creator in some way. All right? What do you suppose he did about it? Being irritated by the facts that his calculations were bringing forth.
He changed his calculations.
He changed his calculations. He brought something into his calculations, a constant, again, math and me. He brought that into his calculations. Why? So he could avoid the idea of an absolute beginning of the universe. He brought something false into his calculations so he could still feel good about what he wanted to believe. Einstein, maybe not the smartest guy ever was. Arthur Eddington, anybody ever heard of him? Eddington, that last thing, 1916 for Einstein. 1919, Eddington is doing some experiments. I don't know the full extent of what he was doing. Let's just suffice it to say he was doing some experiments. He's another scientist. And his experiments are showing that the universe had a beginning. He was irritated by that. He was not happy with the implication that the universe had a beginning. In fact, he found the idea that the universe had a beginning repugnant. Just the very idea. Because if it has a beginning, it has to have had a cause. And what or who is that cause? He found that repugnant. And this is the quote from Eddington. "I would like to find a genuine loophole." He's doing experiments that show there was a beginning. He wants to find a loophole. That's what Einstein did. He made his own loophole by changing his calculations. I've never heard of this guy either, Alexander Friedman. We are up to 1922. Now, Friedman's a pretty smart guy. He's looking at all the work that these other guys have done, and he exposes Einstein's fudge factor that he introduced as an algebraic error. Algebraic. They must have thought that in Algebra 2, because I only got to Algebra 1.
For you math people out there,
The error was 0.
Yes.
which is a huge problem in math. You multiply by 0, everything cancels out immediately. And that's why you put it in there, so you get these calculations.
So these different scientists want to believe one thing, but what they're finding out is something else is true. And then Friedman comes along and he exposes Einstein, and I don't know this for a fact, but probably was able to also expose Eddington as well. Now, there's a Dutch astronomer. You didn't know you were getting a history class tonight, did you? A Dutch astronomer, his name was William de Sitter, if I'm saying that correctly, I don't know. He discovered that the law of general relativity, which we haven't really gotten to yet, required the universe to be expanding, getting larger. Okay. Who believes that? Not these guys. In 1927, the fact that the universe was expanding was actually observed by a guy, an astronomer named Edwin Hubble. Everybody heard of Hubble? Okay. The Hubble telescope is named for Edwin Hubble. And so he's out there in California at, I don't know, the Mount something observatory, and he actually observes that the universe is expanding. That was in 27. In 29, Einstein, remember him? He goes to California to do what? He wanted to look through Hubble's telescope. He wanted to see if what he was saying was right. And what Einstein saw was irrefutable. He said that his bogus calculations were this is a quote, "the biggest blunder of my life." Einstein had claimed to believe in a pantheistic God, a God that was the universe. Afterwards, 13 years after, when he looks through Hubble's telescope, his comments, I'm sure he was still irritated. His comments pointed to the fact that there was a creation and there was a divine being. So we're almost 100 years after the fact. I have no idea what scientists are doing, or astronomers, or any other smart people. But I suspect 100 years later, they think that we have better technology, and we have better this, and we have better that, and we're smarter anyway because we studied all those guys. And we can still say that the universe didn't have a beginning because we're smarter than Einstein or any of those others. I don't know that, but there are people today that say those very things. Why? When the people 100 years ago that espoused that turned around and said, I was wrong, the biggest blunder of my life. The cosmological argument. One writer says that the cosmological argument is the beginning of the end of atheism. Basically, this is just the argument that the universe had a beginning, and if there was a beginning, there had to have been a cause. Hey guys, I'm just rolling here. If you got something to say, jump in, okay? Think about it. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The fundamental principle of science is the law of causality. which says if something had a beginning, it has to have had a cause. We're talking about the universe. If the universe is eternal, it was always there, then there was no cause. It was just always there. But if in fact the universe had a beginning, it had a cause. Someone or something caused that to happen. The universe had a beginning. If it didn't, then there's no need for a cause. There's no need for a creator. Okay? But if it did have a beginning, and Einstein and Eddington and Hubble and those guys reached the conclusion that it did, then it has to have had a cause. And if that's the fact, then we can reach the conclusion that yes, the universe had a cause. Now, before Einstein, the atheists could believe that the universe was eternal, no cause, no creator, or anything else. There were 5 different lines of scientific evidence that were brought to light. You see where I'm talking way over my head? Okay. 5 different lines of scientific evidence that have been discovered that prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the universe did indeed have a beginning. Before we get into those 5 lines of scientific evidence, I'm going to tell you that there are some things contained in here that I don't know that I necessarily agree with or believe. Scientists do, and they use that as the basis for their beliefs. So let's take a look. I said that in the beginning there was a great surge. The surge is an acronym for the 5 lines of scientific evidence. S-U-R-G-E. All right? The S stands for the second law of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is the study of matter and energy. And honestly, observing how fast electrons move is beyond me as to how that goes into anything else. But that's what we're talking about. Okay? The second law states that the universe is running out of usable energy. Okay, what does that mean? How does that prove that the universe had a beginning? The first law of thermodynamics says that the total amount of energy in the universe is constant. That is, there is a finite amount of energy. The second law says it's running out. Okay. Well, if that's the case, it can't be eternal with a steady amount of energy running all the way through it. It had to start here with an amount of energy, and if you believe that it's running out, then that's the case. If the universe had been running, let's say, throughout eternity, it would have run out of energy by now. But luckily for us, here we are. The universe is still going. The universe had to have had a beginning. Think about a flashlight. It has a finite amount of energy contained in those batteries. And you turn them on, and it starts to use that. And there will come a point when that energy is depleted. That's what the scientists are saying with the second law of thermodynamics.
And astronomers have even witnessed and seen stars dying out, where we know at this point they were this bright, and at this point they're not as bright anymore, proving that there is a finite amount of energy.
The second law says that things naturally fall apart, whether that's your car, your house, your body, things fall apart. Okay?
What was that show? There was a show like if people didn't exist, how fast would it take nature to take over it?
I don't know.
It was quick,
Quick.
real quick. Just leave your back door open and see how fast it creates.
If things tend to fall apart, then at one time, can we use this phrase, they had to have had order. They had to be complete and right, and then as they fall apart, whether it's your body, your house, your car, or anything else. So there had to be order at one time. If that's the case, there has to have been a beginning. Otherwise, everything would have fallen apart by now. Here's the funny thing I think about this. And by the way, one of the things that we're talking about, the universe having a finite amount of energy, and I don't know if I'm going to get this word right, it's sometimes called the law of entropy. Okay? You know what the law of entropy requires? I have one word, but it requires Faith. Faith. Scientists make fun of us for our faith. The U in SURGE stands for the universe is expanding. You remember we said a little while ago that Hubble was able to observe the universe expanding back in 1927 in his telescope. Okay, Hubble's telescope confirmed that the universe is expanding. How does that prove a beginning? The example that these guys use in the book, it says, think about this. You're going to watch all of history. You're going to watch a video of all of history, but in reverse order. So we're starting from right now and working your way back to when you were in the auditorium, when you were driving up here, what you did at work, what you slept last night, and we're going to go all the way back to where? We're going to go back, 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 until all matter was nothing. Everything was nothing. And then, what happened? Bang! You know where this is headed, right? The Big Bang. Something came from nothing. Now, my very limited understanding of the Big Bang is that there are people who believe that there was nothing and there was an explosion and now there is all this. I'm a creationist. God said, let there be light. And God said this and this and this, and that's what happened. I believe that. The Big Bang Theory says that the whole matter of the universe, and I'm not just talking about the earth, the entire universe, the whole matter of the universe began to exist at a particular time long ago. It wasn't always there. Okay, I don't know that I believe in this great big explosion, but I do believe that all matter came into existence at a particular time. It wasn't always there. An atheist, I'm going to read this just so I get it exactly right. An atheist must believe that the matter which came to be and what we call the universe today and everything in it, remember this is an atheist's belief, all matter which we call the universe and everything in it came to be from nothing and by nothing. Boom, it just happened. Not from something and not caused by something or someone. That's what an atheist has to believe. The fact that the universe is expanding shows us that it had a beginning. Or
Are you gonna, do you have in your notes about the Genesis 1:1?
I don't.
Okay, so Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Everybody's learned this since grade school, right? But if you were to say, in the beginning, which was God creating time, God created the heavens, which is the universe, and the earth, which is all matter. So all three of those came together the second God said it, and it's the exact first verse of the entire Bible. In the beginning, time, God created the heavens, the universe, and the earth, all matter. And all three of those work together and have to come in existence exactly together. Is where they kind of are pulling in the Big Bang. It had to happen all at the same time.
You know what I like about Genesis 1:1? Those are good points, and they all have to work together. This is what I like about Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. God was in the beginning. God was there when the beginning happened. Okay. Anything else?
Yep. You're right. So the I am is the example of I am, the he is, the he is. He's always been there. He sits outside of our time. He sits outside of our matter. He sits outside of our universe, right? Like he was there when there was nothing to create it.
Okay. We're up to R in our word surge, and this stands for radiation from the Big Bang. Now, we've been talking about the early 1900s up to about 1929. We're going to jump all the way up to 1965. In 1965, there's two scientists, I didn't write their names down. They discovered in their work in some labs, Bell Labs in New Jersey, they discovered some strange radiation. That's as much detail as I'm going to get into. They discovered strange radiation. Was that a big deal? They won the Nobel Prize for this discovery. I'm saying that's a big deal. Okay? In fact, it was called an incredible discovery. Now, what scientists are going to tell you is this radiation that they found is the afterglow from the initial Big Bang explosion. I got a little problem with that. However, this discovery of this radiation, which they claim came from the Big Bang explosion, sets aside any idea that the universe was eternal, that it had no beginning, that it had no cause, it had no creator. Okay? There was something that happened, the Big Bang, and there is radiation that has been discovered from that. The G is for great galaxy seeds. Important word we're going to start with here, if. If the Big Bang occurred, scientists believed there would be ripples in the temperature of that radiation that those two guys in New Jersey discovered. Ripples in the radiation. I don't know what that means either. Okay?
If you want to know, we can talk later afterwards.
Good. There's our technical advisor right over there. If the Big Bang occurred, scientists believe there's going to be ripples in the radiation that came from the Big Bang, the leftover radiation. 1989, NASA sends up a satellite. They called it COBE or COBE or something like that, C-O-B-E, the Cosmic Background Explorer. Do you know your tax dollars are going for that? That goes up in '89. In 1992, nearly 3 years later, they announced their findings. The project leader said, yes, we found the ripples. And the scientists were amazed at what they had found, at the precision of the photographs that they had made of the ripples of the radiation left over from the Big Bang. The guy that was the project leader says, I'm just reading the quote, okay? If you're religious, it's like looking at God. I don't know that this scientist was religious, but he was moved to the point to say, what they have discovered, it's like looking at God. He went on to say, the significance of this discovery cannot be overstated. Anybody ever heard of a guy named Stephen Hawking? Physicist. This is Hawking's quote about this discovery. The most important discovery of the century, if not of all time. Everybody looks to Hawking and say he's the smartest guy of our time and so on. And he said the most important discovery, if not of all time, of the century, if not of all time. They even took pictures of the radiation ripples. But you can see, you can go to a website. I don't have it with me. It's in the book, and one of those guys can give it to you. I didn't bring my book with me. Okay? All right. Finally, Einstein's theory of general relativity. This theory demands an absolute beginning of time, space, and matter. The discovery of Einstein's theory of general relativity is basically the last piece of this whole puzzle, showing that, scientific showing that in fact the universe had a beginning. Its discovery was the beginning of the end of the idea that the universe is eternal. Einstein, who didn't want to believe this stuff, in fact, contributed a great deal to where we are today, that the universe did not have. It was not eternal, but in fact it did have a beginning. Now this next section, I find this kind of interesting. We've entitled it, God and the Astronomers, just some general observations. All right, surge. We've reached a point that we think the universe has a beginning. We, the scientists, the astronomers, and so on. The universe has had a beginning. Okay? at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California. That's where Hubble was back in 29 or 27. And also at NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies, there is a guy whose name is Robert Jastrow. He works at those two places. Jastrow, if I'm saying his name correctly, is a self-admitted agnostic. You remember what the definition of an agnostic is? An atheist doesn't believe in God. An agnostic's not sure. That's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the definition. Okay? He is an agnostic. Looking at those 5 scientific lines of evidence, Serge, Jastrow said, now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origins of the world. The details differ, this is a quote from him, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time. When was that? When God said, let there be light. And further. Jastrow also says, astronomers have proven by their methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation. Isn't this reassuring that scientists and astronomers now say that creation is a fact? The world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth. Last quote from him. That there are what I or what anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Supernatural? Jastrow, Eddington, Wilson, and Penzias, those are the 2 guys in New Jersey that I forgot to write down. They all believed that something supernatural had to have been in place to set all this in motion. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Why supernatural? Why not just natural forces? Why not the things that are in the universe? Why couldn't that be responsible for this happening? Because natural forces didn't exist until what they want to call the Big Bang happened, which was the beginning point of our universe. That's when natural forces were even created. So before that, to make that happen, there had to have been a supernatural force. Nobody has said yet that it's God, but a supernatural force. At that point, at the beginning of the physical universe, time, space, matter, they all came into being. There was no natural world prior to that, therefore there were no natural forces to have caused that to happen. Since a cause cannot come after its effect, natural forces cannot be accounted for causing what they want to call the Big Bang. So, something outside of nature had to have done it. Something supernatural. They believe that the universe was created out of nothing in an instant, and it continues to expand.
Were those modern day scientists, those Eddington and Jastrow?
1900s, early 1900s.
Still not.
Yeah. Eddington, I think, in 1919. Some of those other guys, 1927. Hubble in 27.
Jastrow?
Jastrow is modern day. He's
Okay.
now,
He's-
or in the very recent past. Yeah. Okay. I like this section just because it's The Empire Strikes Back, right? But I like the title, The Empire Strikes Back, but it fizzles out. So what this is about is, what did the atheists say today? Okay. What did the atheists say? We've got 4 different things that they're going to say with regard to this idea that the universe had a beginning and there was a creator and so on. The first is the cosmic rebound theory. They say that the universe has been expanding and contracting forever. Therefore, it didn't have a beginning. It's just been doing this all along. Okay? They say there's no evidence that, there is no evidence that there was a Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang. There was, by their own admission, one event. Therefore, there was no expand, contract, okay? One time. This theory, the cosmic rebound theory, it contradicts that second law of thermodynamics, which talks about the amount of energy is finite and so on and so forth, okay? I didn't bring one with me, I wish I had. If I have a tennis ball in my hand and I drop it and it hits the floor, it's gonna bounce, right? When it rebounds, how far is it gonna go? Is it gonna come back to my hand? Not quite. And it's gonna hit the floor again, and this time, it's not gonna come back as high, and so on and so forth. How long is it gonna bounce? The energy is finite. It will eventually be gone. For the atheists to claim that we can explain all this by the cosmic rebound theory, well, there was no bang after their first bang, if that's what they believe. All right, the second one is imaginary time. When Dale came in here, he says, "You gonna talk about that?" And I said, "Nope." Hawking is the one that came up with imaginary time, at least the best that I can tell. What? What is imaginary time? That's all I can say about that. I mean,
That's all you need to say about that.
Hawking said this. This is a quote. "Almost everyone believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang." Hawking said that. Time had a beginning. But he didn't want to believe that. So he came up with imaginary time. I'm believing that one. Okay. The last one, I think I said 4. There's only 3. Uncertainty. Atheists would say that there is uncertainty about the law of causality, which says everything that had a beginning had a cause, which is the foundation of all science. Okay? Now, they use quantum physics. That sounds like a movie to me. I don't know what that is. And it applies to our ability to predict the location and speed of electrons moving around. Okay? Using their quantum physics and measuring the speed and movement of electrons, they say the idea that everything that had a beginning had a cause is disproven by this idea. This is confusing causality, everything that had a beginning had a cause, with predictability, which is what they're really talking about. Where's the electron going to be and how fast is it going to get there? The fact that we can't predict something like the movement of an electron has no bearing on if something caused that electron to be. And so we're going to take the idea of uncertainty from the atheists and throw it out the window as well. There is no atheistic theory that refutes the cosmological argument. The universe had a beginning, and if it had a beginning, it had a cause. Okay, how come scientists don't accept these conclusions? Why do they want to avoid facts? Jastrow, our guy that we talked about a minute ago, who said he was an agnostic, he's not sure, said this: "Theologians are delighted with proof that the universe had a beginning, but astronomers are upset." He admitted that. The religious people are thrilled with proof that the universe had a beginning, but astronomers are upset. Why? Because they have made their science their religion. You remember early on, I think in the first class, Dalen talked about beliefs are many times influenced by one's personal, objective preferences. And if the scientist wants to believe that, then that's where they're going to go. Okay, hurry. What if the Big Bang Theory is wrong? There's a guy, a physicist at the University of Hawaii, his name is Victor Stegner, and he said The universe exploded out of nothingness. That's what he said. You know what he says now? Well, he's not a full convert, but he says, it looks like there's a beginning. And he wants to apply that to the Big Bang. He says it looks like the Big Bang looking more and more probable all the time. We talked about that Kobe satellite and taking the pictures of the ripples and the radiation and all that stuff that they can explain, right? In 2003, so we're talking another 10 years after they released their first conclusions, more and better evidence from NASA confirms those previous findings concerning the ripples and the radiation. And in fact, the photographs that they took then were even much clearer and much more precise, and so they have even stronger evidence. Okay, we've got all that. But what if the Big Bang Theory is wrong? Does that mean that the universe is eternal? That is, there was no beginning, that it didn't have a creator? Well, the answer to that is no. It doesn't mean that. Why? Because although the second law of thermodynamics supports the idea of a Big Bang, it doesn't depend upon it. Same thing for the idea of the theory of general relativity. There is evidence in geology, which I think we're going to get to a little bit later, that the universe had a beginning. There is philosophical evidence called, I don't know how to pronounce this, Kalam, K-A-L-A-M. This is an Arab word for eternal, a Kalam cosmological argument, which says time had a beginning. So scientifically, from geology, philosophically, there is still evidence of a beginning. Big Bang or not, many scientists say our universe had a beginning. Okay, the universe had a beginning. What do the atheists say to that? You had a beginning, which means you have to have a cause, and you say the cause is God. Who made God? That's the question they want to ask. They don't want to ask, they like to ask. If the earth had a beginning, God made it. Well, who made God? If everything needs a cause, then God needs one too. You know, we believe that everything needs a cause. And if we believe that everything needs a cause, then God needs a cause as well. But that's not what the law of causality says. It says that everything that comes to be needs a cause. God didn't come to be. No one made God. He didn't have a beginning. He, unlike the universe, is eternal. Wait, the atheist says, if you can have an eternal God, then I can have an eternal universe. Logically, that's true. Since something exists today, something must have always existed. And we have two choices. The universe always existed, or something always existed that caused the universe. There's too much evidence that points to the idea, or the fact, I should say, that the universe cannot be eternal. Thus, it had a beginning. It had a cause. It had a creator. I'm going to skip just a little bit here. No, we're not. Sorry, we're going to go over just a couple of minutes. From the things that we talked about tonight, and what I gleaned from the book that we're using, the cause for the universe is something or somebody that was without limits, infinite. Something or somebody that is unimaginably powerful, that can make something out of nothing. Supremely intelligent. Aren't those characteristics what we would ascribe to God? Sure they are. Okay. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing? Either no one created something out of nothing, or someone created something out of nothing. Which one of those two things is more reasonable? No one created something out of nothing, or someone created something out of nothing? If you can't believe that nothing caused something, if you can't believe that, then you don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That's what we got for tonight, folks.